Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural panel podcast live recording of Scribe's Journey with the three scribes. I am Travis J. Crokin, the calm scribe, and I am being joined tonight by my fellow scribes, who I'll let introduce themselves now.
Hi, I'm LJ Stanton, and I am the pedantic scribe.
And I am TR Albee, or Ted, and I am the oddball scribe.
Fantastic. I realize I need to pull something back up here. There we go. All right, so this is the beginning of the very first panel that we're doing. So like I said, this is going to be a little bit of a different format than before. So we're going to start off by giving ourselves a bit of an introduction. And I am, as you all know, the calm scribe. And for maybe some of you don't know, some of you may be new to my stream. I chose the name the calm scribe because I was involved in a car accident. Well, I was hit by a car 8 years ago. And that ended up causing me a lot of serious injuries, and I ended up having to turn to mindfulness and meditation to get myself through a lot of the pain and suffering that I was going through afterwards. And so that's where the calm comes in, because I do a lot of mindfulness and a lot of meditation, and I try to keep my system calm to keep my pain levels down. Scribe is because, as we all know, a scribe is someone who writes down what other people are saying. And the way I write, I tend to talk to my characters and spend time with my characters. And I check in on them, see what they're doing, see what they're up to. And that's how I end up writing my stories. So I consider myself the scribe because my characters tell me what to write, and I put it down on the page. How about you, pedantic scribe?
So I picked the pedantic scribe because that's just kind of how I am. It seemed better than going with the sarcastic scribe or a couple of the other less flattering angry scribe, etc. Kind of a little bit of an opposite of the calm scribe there. But I picked that because it is one of the ways that I like to write is by going in deep dive into a topic, which can usually start with a very pedantic view on a word definition or something like that.
That is fantastic. And for those of us who may not know, can you tell people what pedantic means?
Oh, now you're asking the difficult question. Let me pull you up the proper definition so that it's not,
The proper
this
Webster,
is a
right?
part of it, because I have brain fog as well. I have not been in an accident the way that the comm scribe has, but I definitely have a lot of brain fog from my chronic illness. So we can go with the pedant, which I personally like the second and third definitions of one who makes a show of knowledge or a formalist or precisionist in teaching, instead of the more blowhard one, which is one who is unimaginative or unduly emphasizes the minutiae in presentation or use of knowledge. So I don't lean towards that one as someone who writes fantasy. But that does give you a bit of a idea of pedantic is the formalist or precision, and expecting that and wanting that and desiring that.
I think we can all say that you're not, that being non-creative is definitely not an issue for you. So, or for any of us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here doing this. How about yourself, Oddball?
Yeah, I actually, LJ, she's the one who kind of helped me figure out what my scribe title was, because I didn't realize that I actually had it already up on my Instagram. I looked for a name on there, and oddball scribe seemed just to fit me like a glove. I'm quite odd. My wife would agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that's pretty much it. I'm just odd. And there's nothing wrong with being that, so it just, like I said, fit me like a glove. But without her help, I wouldn't probably still be trying to figure out exactly what I was. So, it's pretty awesome.
It's going to be like the one time I've actually named anything in my life.
Yeah, but I mean, you're the one who called it out. You're like, it's already there. I'm like, oh yeah, hold on. That fits really well. So, um, but I mean, as a kids book author, you have to think a little bit askewed. And even as a kid, my mom used to call me beyond unique, which I'm still to this day wondering whether or not that is an insult. I'm not really too sure, but the oddball scribe definitely fits me pretty well. So
That works. I think the names that parents give their kids tend to be coming from a loving place.
I'm assuming so. Yeah, no, I always like messing with my mom. Still to this day, it's like, what did you mean by beyond unique?
Well, it's one of the things that we say to our daughter, my wife and I, is that we call her a crappy baby. And we tell her that she's being a crappy baby. And it's not that she's being crappy, but she will cry and she'll switch from being crying to being very happy and back and forth really quickly. So I'm like, are you crying or are you happy or are you just being crappy? What are you doing? And
Interesting. That's one way to put it. I thought you were alluding to something else, but I mean, babies are babies, so it is.
Yep.
I was like, wow.
that they definitely are. Yeah, so for people that are just joining us, we are going to start in about 5 minutes. We're going to start into the podcast recording aspect of the stream. But this is the Scribe's Journey with 3 scribes, and we will be discussing all things writing, bit by bit, slowly, over time, over years. We will teach you.
And learn a thing or two along the way.
Yeah, always good to learn.
Well, that's what I say about doing the streaming and doing all of this stuff with Twitch is, apart from the technology stuff that I'm learning so much, it is the fact that I learn so much every time I'm on stream. Anytime I learn from the chat, I learn from fellow writers and authors and people that I'm interacting with, and it's just a never-ending supply of knowledge, which I absolutely love about doing this stuff. So have a great night. WTF, thank you for stopping through. Enjoy your new fish. So the way this works is we'll chat. For the first 10 minutes of the panel, we will talk with chat a little bit here and there. And then when we do hit the 10-minute mark, which is, you'll notice, because I will actually say the word mark. And then we're going to go into it. And once I say mark and we're in that half-hour period, I will not be interacting with chat. We will not be answering questions, but we will be gathering questions to answer them after the half hour is over for the final 20 minutes of the podcast, or the final 20 minutes of the program. And then the final half hour of the stream will just be wrapping up tie-ups and things like that. And we're going to get into the movie of the week for next week, which I hope both of you can stop by for. We're going to be watching The Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah, you were saying that.
Yes.
I'm super excited about that, and that's because it is widely considered to have the very best opening paragraph of any book written.
I just picked up the compilation of short stories that has it in there, and I'm
really?
so stoked. I'm gonna have to read it before.
Yeah. Even just the first paragraph. And actually there's a podcast I love called Writing Excuses, and they coincidentally did a panel on The Haunting of Hill House, because they were talking about first page mistakes that people make. And I have to say, it was, that first paragraph, when you read it and reread it and reread it, it just continues to send shivers down your spine. And that's going to be bringing up something that we're going to be doing on my stream on Monday, where we're going to be breaking down or redoing the first page of the story I'm working on.
That is exciting.
Yes. I think that's something that I think we'll get to at some point in a future stream, is talking about first pages and things like that as well. And
Definitely.
also, this may sound funny, but I'm also considering doing a stream in the future where I just spend an hour breaking down the first sentence and coming up with that. Because it's one thing to write a book really quick, and it's another thing to make sure you've nailed it.
Yeah. It's so important to get that hook right off the bat. And it's tough.
Do you think that's just as important, Ted, for a children's book, that you need to get that hook right off the bat?
Well, yeah, you got to keep the kids entertained, right? I mean, and you also have to keep their parents entertained. So it's a twofold thing, right? And the kids want to know, if they want to know more about what the book's about, right from the first sentence, because it really isn't a paragraph, right? Because again, depending on the type of kid book you're writing, you're limited to a certain amount of words, but you also, again, the parents are definitely, if they're not interested, they're not going to want to pick it up again, regardless of how much their kids want to read it again. So there's always that challenge. So
Yeah,
absolutely.
that makes sense. All right, so we are going to get into the podcast recording session of this. So we're going to be doing another introduction of ourselves just to get this thing rolling. And then we're going to jump into a conversation about what we're working on, what we're doing, and how this is all going to happen. And some really cool stuff we've got coming up. So I'm going to do the official mark here and say, Mark. Welcome everyone to the very first inaugural session of Scribe's Journey with the Three Scribes. I am Travis J. Crokin, the Calm Scribe, and I am joined with my fellow scribes who will introduce themselves now.
I'm LJ Stanton, the pedantic scribe.
And I am TR Albee, who is the oddball scribe.
Fantastic. Thank you both for being here, for agreeing to do this. The Scribe's Journey with the Three Scribes is a writing podcast where we'll be discussing the different aspects of writing, from marketing, from actually putting words down on the paper, editing, finding editors, avoiding predatory publishing houses, all of these other things that come up, and how to enter contests and things like that. So to get started with this, let's talk a little bit about what we are currently working on. So Ted, you were just talking about talking about first pages and first lines of writing a kid's story, and you're working on a kid's book and a podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've got going on right now?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the creative flow for what how I started writing these podcasts and these kids books came from a bedtime story I was telling my son. I was short. It was about a dragon and mouse, and they wanted to go on a picnic, but the mouse couldn't fly, and because it doesn't have any wings. So the dragon picked them up, and they went on a picnic. But it kind of expanded into this giant steampunk universe. I started writing a handful of picture books. I have about 2 of the 5 finished, and I realized that the artwork is very expensive, and what would be probably a good idea is to start on something that would be less art focused and more story focused. And I can totally talk about picture books and the art focus at a later time, because I will ramble on and someone will have to stop me. But currently I'm actually about 2,000 words away from finishing my first mid-grade novel. It's in the same universe that I'm working on in this the steampunk universe, which is an alternate Earth, that the picture books were in. And it's, like you said, Travis, I'm going to produce this into a free podcast for parents to listen to with their kids, and also publish this as an audiobook and a mid-grade novel, first of a series. So, but I'm excited. Almost done. First draft.
Yay!
I'm ready to roll. I know.
That is so exciting, being done the first draft. And audiobooks is something I need to look into more. They're becoming more and more of a thing. They used to be kind of a couple of houses that were doing audiobooks, and now they're becoming just massive repertoires for writers. If there's some writers I know that audiobooks make up 50% of their income that they've got coming in. But I have to ask you, as we all know, that generally in a story, the character is in a different place from the beginning than they are at the end, or at the end than they are from the beginning, to say it properly. So without giving away a spoiler, does the mouse get wings at the end of the story?
Well, so no. Well, okay. So let me step back here in a sec. So the bedtime story that I told my son, I actually turned into a picture book, and I wrote that. And he's an inventor, so he actually kind of does get wings. So yes, to answer your question, in the picture book that I wrote, based on the bedtime story, he does kind of get wings in his own way. So, but he's a bit crafty. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. LJ, what do you have in the fire right now?
Oh boy. Well, obviously, working with you guys here, and that is in addition to I co-own the indie publishing house Sword and Board LLC, and I am also working on the sequel to the book that I published last year called The Dying Sun. It's the first book in a series. It's called The Gods Chronicle, that is set in a high fantasy world. Kind of think Game of Thrones. So if you're a little bit squeamish, it's not going to be the series for you. But if you want to find a high fantasy novel that is outside of the Eurocentric model, it takes place in a continent that is similar to the Middle East, Africa, and Asia if it was a giant supercontinent. And it is a story dealing with a religious civil war going on, and that is where it all starts.
That's something that I still haven't picked up a copy of the book, I'll admit. I feel very bad about that. I definitely am going to make it one of the next books I buy because it sounds very fascinating. And that's how a lot of, the religions really kind of started. There was a period where there was a lot of religions and this massive war broke out and only a few rose to the top and stayed at the top that way.
Exactly. So for this one, it is that we've had a monotheistic religion that has been here on the continent for 900 years. And then suddenly these priestesses show up saying that they are from the old gods and that they have a message and a mission. And then everything just explodes from there.
Now, that's an exciting incident if I've ever heard one.
Yes.
What gave you the inspiration for that?
I have always been very passionate about mythology, especially Egyptian mythology. And then it went a little bit back into Roman and Greek mythology because of course, that's what we all study in school. And then as I grew up, I just became more and more fascinated with the Middle East as just a location and the cultures that are there and the rich diversity of people in that corner of the world. And the fact, too, that I've always loved fantasy. It's just been my absolute favorite ever since, I could get my hands on and understand Lord of the Rings. That was my jam. But it is a little bit boring after a while because you get these really European models and it's always kind of the same group of people who look very similar doing very similar things in similar settings, and I wanted to break out from that. And it's been really exciting actually to see how there's been an update, I would say, in the industry with more and more books like this coming out with more diverse settings.
And I think having more diverse settings in the fantasy world may help the production and sale of fantasy in other countries, because I find fantasies tend to be a very heavily westernized thing, or at least Western fantasies do really well in Western cultures.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice to kind of break open that market a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one lady that I am so excited to get my book into her hands because she took a long look at it and did the I want to read this, and she is in Lebanon. So it has been quite a journey that this book has taken to try and get to her, but I think it's arriving this week, and I shipped it to her in May. So
Well, that's awesome.
Wow.
I'm really excited to get her opinion on everything.
That is fantastic. And then have her blow it up through Lebanon with, and get
Here's
everyone else
hoping.
reading it.
Here's hoping.
Well, that's quite the time to get the book there. So for myself, I do a lot of different things, and I work with plotters, so I do a lot of outlining and working with outlining and plot points and things like that, and I really get into the guts of storytelling, and which is fantastic. I find having a job that allows you to focus on your passion and what you do is a great way of doing things. So the story that I'm working on currently is sci-fi, which is a different... I haven't written a sci-fi novel before. I've done thrillers and mysteries and kids' books in the past. The book I'm working on is called The Lion of Archinomus, and it is set more than 1,000 years in the future, in the year 3136. And it is, the main premise behind it is there's a group of aliens called the Septrifides who have been monitoring the human species for the past 250,000 years. That's what they do, is they go through the universe and they find an intelligent species that's burgeoning and follow them till they hit a certain level of intelligence. And then they start working with them to increase their technological capabilities so that they can go through the world or through the universe and help continue the work that they're doing. Unfortunately, because humans have this thing that everything we come across, we have to put into our mouths and eat. The major crisis in this is that one of the top chefs in the world decides he wants to be the first one to cook and serve alien flesh. So one of the aliens ends up getting murdered, and that kind of sours the relationship and the agreement that they have.
I love that as a premise because,
Oh.
we are really bad about looking at something being like, I should put that in my mouth.
Yeah, everything.
Terrible
We think
idea
everything
half
is
the
edible.
time.
Yeah, it's. Oh, yeah.
That is, and that's actually how I got the idea. Was I was sitting there in the shower one day and I thought, if we did finally make contact with aliens and had a proper communication with them, how long would it take before one of us tried to eat them? And I don't think
shower thoughts are amazing for getting productivity done.
They absolutely are. I love shower thoughts. And the funny thing is, I've actually got religion tied into my story as well. Because the aliens are waiting for they wait for the species to pass what they call the God barrier. And that is that so long as the species, human or otherwise, believe that they are created specifically by a greater being, then they're not willing or able to host or meet another alien species of a higher intellect, because that challenges everything they believe. If I'm special and I'm unique, where is this coming from? So they wait until the God barrier religion has kind of broken down within the planet, and then they enter in and try to interact with the species. So, but religion still is factored in. There is still a religion there because humans realize that getting rid of religion altogether was non-effective. There's a certain aspect of society that doesn't want to understand science, doesn't care about science. They don't want to put deep thought into things. They just want to know that they're being taken care of and they're being looked after. And there's a certain level of comfort in the rituals of religion. So the religion disappeared and then came back in a new format in this story.
I'm excited for you to finish this.
Yeah, I've been watching your stream on Twitch for a while as you've been writing this, and when you were talking about you had an idea in the shower, I thought you were going to say, I wonder how aliens would taste. But
Well, I have eaten. I am one of those people. If you name something, I've probably tried it at some point. There's a few things that I haven't hit, like century eggs. I'm looking at those. There is a spot I found in my city that I can buy them though.
What are century eggs? You got to explain that now.
So century eggs are eggs that have they're black and rubbery and have a very strong scent. And it's a Asian delicacy where the egg is wrapped in, put into soy base and other not chemicals, but other salt and other ingredients. And it's left to kind of cook within these ingredients over not 100 years, but over a long period of time, over several years. And that slowly cooks the egg, and you get this very unique, rich flavor from it.
Wow.
So I'll try it at some point with that.
Stream it when you do.
Yeah.
That's not a bad idea. There we go.
It would be fun. Yeah.
I actually need to get working on my book. That's the problem, is there's so many things that I need to just sit down, and I've been trying to write my book on stream, but 1 or 2 days a week is not enough time to put into a novel to get it done. So I need to actually do some behind the scenes work and also keep things a little bit surprising for people. But I do like to do things on stream. Like, I've already taken my story and looked at the hero's journey, and not the hero's journey, sorry, the action adventure plot line, and made sure and checked to see if I was hitting the right plot points along the way. And it turned out, naturally, I was able to, let me rephrase that, I was able to naturally hit those points. Without thinking about them, they kind of flowed in to that. And that actually brings us up to our book of the month. So the book of the month that we've got going on, we will be doing a book of the month, each time that we do one of these panels. And this book of the month that Ted is currently showing on stream is The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell. This is a longer book. It's actually very fascinating when you get into it. It is written, you can tell it's when it was written. There's some of the verbiage, some of the language and things like that are a little bit older.
First sentence.
For those of you that are not aware of this, the first sentence that LJ is referring to is, so that's the preface. Whether we listen with aloof amusement to the dreamlike mumbo-jumbo of some red-eyed witch doctor of the Congo, or read with cultivated rapture thin translations from the sonnets of the mysteries of Lao Tzu, now and again crack the hard nutshell of an argument of Aquinas, or catch suddenly the shining meaning of a bizarre Eskimo fairy tale. It will be the one shape-shifting yet marvelously constant story that we find, together with a challengingly persistent suggestion of more remaining to be experienced than will ever be known or told.
It ends strongly.
It does end strongly, but it does end very much a product of its own time. Or begin very much a product of its own time.
Well, this was written, I think he wrote this in what, the 50s, the first one?
9, I think, is when it was published.
59?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it is a fascinating book in that it does cover the monomyth, and it also speaking about religion, it does also cover religion and how basically what ended up with this is Joseph Campbell studied stories, mythologies, mystery, or religions, fables, all these different things and traditions of cultures all over the world for many years, and realized they all kind of had a similar theme, and that was what he related to with the monomyth. And that's a circular cycle that goes through, which is kind of the grandfather of the hero's journey. So if you are a writer, this is definitely a must-read book to read. It is great for understanding your craft, for understanding storytelling throughout life and history. Every time I read, I've been driving my wife nuts because I keep stopping and being like, oh, you have to hear how it describes this. I find just the descriptions are absolutely gorgeous. Like where he talks about how all of life is contained within the egg of a flea, and the entire taste of the ocean is contained in one drop. And it's just beautiful metaphors and similes that he has in there. But this is an important book to read, at least pages 41 to 205, I believe it is, because our next panel, the end of August, will be discussing the hero's journey. And this is a good book to have some background in the hero's journey and how we got to that section.
And how important, as you said, it is to know what the hero's journey is, particularly when you're writing a novel. Even for short stories or a children's book too, it's you need to know what that is so that you can write it effectively or break it effectively. If you don't know the rules, you can't break them well.
That's exactly it. You need to know what the rules are to know what you're breaking in order to have it be effective. And that's something that I find with this is that once you understand the basic principles, and to me, it's been fascinating to just see how different religions, different faiths, different cultures have had a very similar pattern going through, which is the hero's journey. And that's what I was saying when I looked at the action-adventure plot outline for The Line of Archinomus. When I said I naturally hit those plot points, it's because I know and understand, and I'm still learning, but I have a certain level of knowledge and understanding of this. So when I'm writing the story, there's a certain flow that I get into. And that happens, it's not at 10%, at 20%, at 30% these things have to happen, but generally within those blocks, with between 8% and 12% of the story, this, the inciting incident should be occurring. And when you understand what it works, and not only what, but why it works and how it carries you forward is fantastic.
I mean, as you mentioned applying to kids' books. I think when we talk about kids' books, there's so many, I wouldn't say subgenres, but I think as you get into the older versions of it, like the chapter books, I could see that being applied, or mid-grade novels, or even YA, especially YA, right? Those themes definitely can go hand in hand. But beyond that, I think I mean, I read. I've been reading a lot to my son, over the last 6 years, and he is, there are. I guess it depends on the story, right? But like, as you go, the older versions of this genre of kids books, how it's subcategorized, right? Those definitely apply. I 100% agree with you. But I mean, now that makes me want to challenge myself to write a picture book that follows the hero's journey in a fashion that would actually work, right? Because I within 1,000 words, and that would be a challenge. I think that would be kind of fun to do. I don't know how, but I think I will one day. So
Do it.
I should. Yeah.
That sounds like a very good challenge to present to yourself. But I find that, because you're right, it does. When I say it's the grandfather of storytelling, we're going to break into this fully next panel, but that's just looking at one aspect of it, where in a story it's circular. We start with the ordinary world. There's something that displeases the protagonist about it. They go off to do something to change it. They learn stuff, they get stuff, they find stuff, they defeat people or antagonists, and they transform and they come back different, back to their ordinary world in a different manner. This factors in across the board. If you're looking at a romance, it's the same
Right.
thing as someone who believes they can't find love, or they're not worthy of love, or everyone of the opposite sex is a cheater. And then something happens to force them out of that mold. They learn along the way, and then they come back to their ordinary world with a new perspective of, oh, you know what, I am lovable, and maybe not everybody in the opposite sex is a terrible person. But there is still that transformation aspect of it, and circular coming back to the ordinary world with a new perspective. And it's the same thing with romantic comedies, with action adventure, with thrillers, with all that kind of stuff. There's a transformation that goes on through the protagonist as you go through.
Yeah, it's definitely not something that is only applicable to fantasy or to sci-fi, even
Right.
though certainly I think some of the greatest examples, or some of the easiest examples to spot that hero's journey, are in sci-fi and fantasy.
Yeah, most definitely.
That'd be like all the Star Wars stuff in the two offices here
Yeah.
as the clearest example of a hero's journey.
That's exactly it. And there is just something nice about a circular cycle to a story. And I think, even thinking back to the kids' books that I've written, it's the same thing with the one, Tiny Teddy, which is a story about a small spider who's always teased by his siblings and wants to prove himself to them. So he goes out to there ends up being a food crisis, and he goes out to try to save the day for the food crisis. And when he's out doing that, he finally gets his growth spurt and can't come back home. And he realizes along the way that he doesn't need the to like going out and trying to do something dangerous to win the approval of his siblings was kind of a silly thing to do, even though it did pay off in the end. It was very dangerous. And so he is bigger at the end of the story, and he has a better understanding of how, like, what respect from siblings is and what's worth risking to get to there.
Well, was that like what category was that, like, kind of broken into? Was it a picture book? Was it a
It's a bedtime story. It's so the way I write, I like to, especially for kids, I like to include words that are very big and very, like, not very big, but bigger words, and make it a little more difficult, because
Well, yeah,
I remember,
learn.
because I remember growing up and having looked like that's a conversation started with my parents, like, oh, what does that word mean? And you're learning. And so this one was designed to be read by kids and to be read by parents to the children, but it is more of a picture book. So I'm currently in the works of having it illustrated, setting it up to be illustrated fully. My other book, The Big Deep, is more of a YA novel, or book, not novel, but book. And that's has a big twist in it. And it's about a main character named Ishmael who is trying to save his partner, who he thinks is... he wakes up because there's an earthquake and there's stuff happening where they are, and his partner's not there. And he goes off trying to find her. And the big twist in that one is that because this is a fast-paced action adventure where he's going through, and the tunnels are collapsing and all this stuff is going on around them. And it turns out that the characters you find at the end are actually moles. So they're little mice, and the tunnels are actually mole tunnels underground.
Nice.
as they go along. Yeah, because even my kids' book have that for twist in them.
Of course.
You know, I want to say that I like how the dynamics between the three of us are really kind of as far as where we are in our writing journey, right? Our scribe's journey, right? I mean, Travis, you have a number of books that you've self-published. LJ, I think that might be your first book, right? That you
Yep.
self-published, and I'm in the process of doing my first book, right? So I have nothing published. So we're all at different stages in our scribe's journey. I'm doing air quotes. No one can see that, but it's fine. So yeah, I think, and it's always interesting hearing your experiences and, you know, LJ, your experiences as well as this. So I don't know. I just want to kind of point that out, you know, that, you know, we're all on our own different journeys as I, you know, throw a random tangent right in there because that's what I do, being odd as I am. Yes, thank you. There we go.
Well, and I enjoy that there's a difference in genres as well.
Right.
You know, we kind of, I think, hit most of the bases, particularly because of Travis being able to, since he's written in so many different types, but there's some experience at least for everything. For anyone who is listening, depending on what they want to write, they should be able to get something out of this. And I think that I love the fact that you guys have worked on and written kids' books, because that is something I eventually would like to do as I have young nephews. But right now, it's definitely no, you cannot read anything Auntie LJ writes. Those are questions that I don't need to have their parents doing the, excuse you, they can't know about torture yet, they're 2.
No, I get that. Like, you know, one of the things that we let my son do is listen to audiobooks, and you know, Travis, you were saying how you use larger words, and a lot of these authors who are writing these mid-grade novels that we're letting him listen to, even classics like, you know, the Narnia series, right? He loves pretty much every book in that series, but then there's words that he comes back and he's like, what is this, you know? And it's you know, but yeah, you gotta keep it clean for kids. No torture, you know. No torture. So
But I think that never goes away. Like, I still read books with, like, it's funny, but I've actually got a dictionary beside me, and my wife has one beside her side of the bed as well. And yes, you can look things up really quickly online, but I am still to this point where I'm reading a book and I look at something and I don't know what a certain word is. So I put the book down, I pull out the dictionary. I'm like, oh, what is that? And then I kind of like, it's my little word of the day thing that happens to go through. And The Hero with a Thousand Faces can definitely do that for you. That's one thing I will say. It is a bit of the first 3 chapters are a bit of a slog, in the sense that they're written in very high level kind of academic talk. And then once they get into the actual breakdown of the journeys and things like that and how these structures work, becomes a little more accessible. But it is very academic and kind of dry for the first 3 chapters.
See, we're slogging through it so that other people don't have to. We can be, I think, the Cliff Notes and the Coles Notes.
ooh, I like how that, I like you put that. Yeah.
That's exactly it. And that's something that I think is, it is important to be able to have the added vocabulary and the thing, like when you're putting the stuff in, I find books need to be a point of conversation.
Yes.
You don't want to just have someone pick up your book, read it, and say, oh, that was pretty cool, and put it down and walk away and not talk about it again. You want one to have them jump up and down and be like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever read, and then go hit their friends over the head with it and say, you have to read this. But the other thing too is to have the book like The Hero with a Thousand Faces, where they're going to touch the person next to them and be like, hey, listen, you have to hear this. This is so well written. This is so well done. Like, one thing that drives me wild is when people watch movies and television series and they say that, you know, like, I absolutely love this like, you know, my favorite character quote is this, and you know, this, when this character said this thing, it really moved me and it really changed my life, and it was this amazing thing. And it's amazing how these quotes are attributed to the character, but there's an author behind that put that quote together. Right? Yeah, or a writer.
And just as a sub note, I don't think we're promoting anybody hit each other with this book, because this book is quite heavy. Actually, I mean, you might actually do some damage hitting someone with this. It's just, it is quite. It was like 400 pages, right?
I was gonna say it's only 400 pages, but it's dense.
It's thick.
It is hefty.
Yeah. Don't
But
hit
as
people
far
with
as
books.
like educating people and making them, you know, have
Right.
to look things up, that was one of the things I really wanted to do with my book series, in part because of the fact that I am taking and being inspired by these different cultures. That it was I want it to be a book where Western readers are going to pick it up and have to do I don't actually know what a kaftan is, or what a niqab is, or any of these things that we're not very familiar with, and make them look it up and be exposed to a culture, and often a religion even, that has been so villainized in the West, and
Right.
to have it be no, it's really not that scary when a woman is walking down the street in hijab and whatnot, and bring in a little more familiarity for them, so that we have books that are opening people's minds to so much more, and using fiction to educate for real world matters as well.
You know, I agree with that, because I was recently, you know, over the last few months, one of my, I'm part of this writers cafe, and I was actually contacted by one of the a young African-American writer, screenplay writer, who's only ever written romance. And he told me, he's like, look, I want to write, I have this idea for this science fiction, you know, movie. And we sat down, and all he wants to do is challenge, like you said, everybody's opinions and everybody's knowledge on the African culture, and everything that we created within this outline for these 4 scripts that we're writing. Right, we have an outline for the first movie. We're in the process of writing it. Is going to try to challenge, and we're hoping it's going to challenge people's minds on view of African culture, African lore, dance moves, you know, everything. Right, so the more things that are out there that challenge it, you know, it makes it easier for people to understand what they don't know, right? And I think that's what's really causes some of the things in the world, you know, that we hopefully as a race, as a humanity, we can work out. So challenging things like that is definitely the way to go, right? You have to. And I have not picked up your book yet either. I need to do that. So shame on me.
Guys, get with it.
I know, seriously.
That's it. But no, but it is very important to challenge, and because I think as writers we have a certain, not obligation or duty, but the opportunity to affect real change in how we do things, and to open, because I know a lot of my perspectives and points of view in life have been changed through reading books. There's one I absolutely love. I'm blanking on the author's name right now, so I'm not going to bring it up, but I think it's On the Suffering of Others was the name of it, and it was just a wonderful book. But I'd have to look that up. But one thing I try to do too, just to wrap up this one little bit, is I also, as much as you want to have people read and look at other things, you also don't want people putting your book down all the time. Right? Like that's you don't want to pull people out of your books. You don't want to be throwing constant heavy hitting words at them. So that's one thing I'm doing with my novel, The Line of Archinomus, is these are aliens from another planet. And I am introducing some of their language subtly throughout the book by using analogies and using turns of phrase that are common in the human world. So there's, in one scene, there's the main character is talking about how he really doesn't like this guy or thinking about how he really doesn't like this guy that's coming up to talk to him. And in it, I say that it's not that he has a croon to grind against this guy. He just doesn't know when to stop talking. So most people are going to know the saying, it's not that he has an axe to grind against this person. So that's one of the ways that I'm trying to insert foreign language into this, is by using certain words in the in common English dialect.
Context is so important. So important. Because, yeah, as you said, you really don't want people just putting your book down every 2 seconds or having to go to your appendices every 2 seconds to do the crap. What was that again?
Yeah, that's what I found with the Wheel of Time series. For the first couple of books in the Wheel of Time series, and if you took time away from reading the series and came back, because Robert Jordan created his entire language and different verbiage and all these things for it, and there's at certain points there's a lot of flipping to the back to see what this meant again and tying things back in together. So it was a lot of research as you're going through, and the fact that it took a year or two for each book to come out. Generally, for the first 20 pages or the first several chapters of a new book, you were trying to refresh yourself on what was happening for that. So our next stream is going to be, our next panel and podcast is going to be on August 26th. So it's the fourth Thursday of every month is when we're going to be doing these. And the next one we are going to be talking about is going to be the hero's journey. And we're going to be discussing Joseph Campbell. And we're going to have another book of the month for you. When we talk about book of the month, don't feel the need to run out and buy it. Although if you want to support an author, in this case, an author's foundation, by all means, go out and buy it. But don't forget, libraries exist for a reason. And there are very good opportunities. I spend a lot of time in the library when it's not a pandemic. And my wife does as well. And our daughter is going to be as well. But this is the Scribe's Journey. And we're hitting the ground running with this stuff. So there is going to be a lot of very exciting stuff coming up. So things to look out for in the next couple of weeks. We just have to launch the Scribe's Journey website, Twitter page, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, Discord, all of these things. And obviously, podcast will be coming out. So this is going to be a full-fledged experience where you'll be able to immerse yourself, ask questions, and jump in on things. And stay in touch with us when we're not doing the panel once a month.
Yep.
Yeah. So to that end, this is the end of the podcast section of the Scribe's Journey with the three scribes. We will be staying around to answer some questions and continue the conversation off podcast. So if you are interested in seeing this podcast recorded live, do come check us out. It is twitch.tv/thecalmscribe, and it is every fourth Thursday of the month at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when we're doing the live recording of this. All of this information will be made available on the website and all of our social media channels and things that we have set up as well. So for this point, I would like to thank my fellow scribes for being here tonight. And does anyone have any final things to say before we wrap up the podcast section of this?
I'm good. I am excited for the continued journey.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is it's going to be a real fun journey, and can't wait to see what happens in the future. So.
And I could not agree more with that sentiment. And this is the Scribe's Journey. Like I said, we are the three scribes, but the Scribe's Journey isn't just about our journey. It's about your journey as well as writers and authors and aspiring writers out there. So if there is anything that you would like to have covered on a future topic or future panel, or if there's a guest that you think we absolutely have to have on the show, please take note of it. And when we do launch all of our social media stuff, let us know. We'll be keeping track. And this is being built out to help everybody, us and you included, in expanding your writing career and become better writers. So thank you all for joining us. And that is it for the Scribe's Journey for this month. We'll see you on August 26th.
Thanks, guys.